we begin, people want to know, so why are you holding this hearing? The reason we are is because low and middle income workers are falling through the cracks in our economy. And these are hardworking Americans, construction workers, nurses, cashiers, and they're all trying to juggle work obligations and still be there for families who need them. The American people understand this, and they know what's needed to make sure that everybody's got a chance. Everybody in our economic system has a chance to get ahead. According to poll after poll, 70% of Americans want national paid leave. They know that too often without it, workers are forced to make the impossible choice of a paycheck or caring for a loved one in need. Paid leave is so crucial to many American workers that a recent poll from the Bipartisan Policy Center showed that paid family and medical leave benefits are as important as pay when considering starting or returning to work. Americans want to work. Let me emphasize this. And our colleague from Ohio, Senator Brown, if you're friends with him, he says that a couple of times a day, and he's absolutely right. Americans want to pay their bills, they want to provide for families, but we all know sometimes life intervenes, and sometimes you got to be there for your family. In fact, that same bipartisan poll shows that 72% of Americans who aren't currently working say that it is because these family, personal challenges intervene, health, caregiving. And Congress talks an awful lot about how to deal with the worker shortage crisis. Today, we're going to talk about an opportunity to do something about it. If a nation as powerful and prosperous as ours sits on this issue, we're going to have an answer to the fact that somehow the United States is the only developed nation in the world without a national paid leave program. Today, only 1 out of 4 workers in America have access to paid leave. There's been progress, but 14 states and the District of Columbia are really about it. So there's a lot more to do. And I believe America's got an opportunity to better support workers and better support our economy. And if I were to sum up our challenge, and I'm looking at Mr. Verhoeven from Albany because they kind of embody this thinking, we ought to be doing what my mom always said. Take out your sharp pencil and get to work on solving an issue like this, where you bring together people on both sides of the aisle and businesses of various sizes and communities. And by the way, Oregon can give you some pretty good tips, which is why we're so thrilled to have Ben Verhoeven here today. Ben owns a small farm in Albany, Oregon. And if you are looking for a place on the planet where residents are good at taking out a sharp pencil and solving problems, making things work, all you have to do is look at Albany, Oregon. So today you're going to hear Mr. Verhoeven say that providing paid leave has helped him hang on to extraordinary workers and help his business grow and thrive. He's going to tell us how back home and the government began to work in this area. He was able to do even more to help his employees, and it was straightforward and affordable. And his story, to me, is an illustration of what we can do if we, as a committee and my colleagues here, have all been part of this, sit down and represent how to solve a problem in a bipartisan way. Too many workers are falling between the cracks, and paid leave is a missing piece of our agenda. Last point I'm going to make is I'm looking at the dais, and our colleagues of both political parties are constantly saying our biggest job is to compete against China. Well, I want to close by saying smart paid leave policies can add vast sums of economic growth to the American economy. And we can do it if we come together, say our focus is to outcompete China, and put in place policies that leverage our economy at all levels, which is to give workers the chance when they have to be with family, to take that time and be there for their communities and their jobs at other points in their life. So we're really pleased that we're going to have a great panel. I appreciate my colleagues. We got both sides represented here, so that's what you need to come up with some solutions. And I recognize my friend, Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an important hearing, as nearly every working American will need to take leave from work at some point in their career. The Finance Committee has previously explored this topic, including holding a subcommittee hearing in 2018 and convening a paid leave working group organized by then Chairman Grassley and Chairman Wyden. I was a member of that bipartisan working group, which sought to find the most sustainable path forward on paid leave policies. As I noted at that time, I'm committed to addressing the needs of working Americans, both inside and outside the home, while also ensuring that businesses have the flexibility they need to succeed, particularly in today's challenging economy. As we will hear today, paid leave can greatly benefit workers and their families, from improving employee morale to helping families meet caregiving responsibilities. However, there are many approaches to expanding paid leave, and the details matter. Employers across the country are struggling to fill vital roles in their organizations, with nearly 9.6 million jobs remaining unfilled nationally. In a recent survey from the National Federation of Independent Business, 43% of small business owners reported job openings they could not fill in the current period. In light of these workforce challenges, Congress must be careful not to interfere with employers' existing paid leave offerings, which play an important part in their efforts to recruit and retain workers. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2023, 78% of private sector workers have access to paid sick leave, and 79% have access to paid vacation. Additionally, 73% of small business employers offer paid time off to the majority of their full-time employees, and 67% offer 2 weeks or more of that leave. Imposing a one-size-fits-all paid leave program could actually limit employers' ability to offer paid leave policies that meet the unique needs of their workforce or significantly diminish existing employer-provided paid leave altogether. Creating a new federal paid leave program also raises questions about implementation challenges and costs to taxpayers. States' experiences standing up paid leave programs illustrate some of the challenges that a new federal program could face. Several states that have enacted paid leave programs have had difficulty setting up even the most basic components of the program, leading to implementation delays. For example, applicants in multiple states have experienced delays with getting their claims approved, with processing times in one state expected to increase from about 5 weeks to 4 months by 2025, absent additional staffing. One state has had to repeatedly increase the revenue going to the program to avoid a funding deficit. And in another state, analysts have raised concerns that revenues may be too low to pay future benefits. Even though there are many challenges on this topic, the bipartisan work that continues from members on this and off this committee shows the importance of the issue. I appreciate our witnesses being here today and look forward to your testimony to help us thread this needle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank my colleague, and my colleague raises a number of issues that I think there's an opportunity to find some common ground on, and that's what we ought to do today. I mean, the issue of flexibility, that's indisputable. We want to recognize that, different parts of the country are different, and we want to work to make sure we wring every dollar that we have for this important cause out and be efficient. So I'll look forward to hearing our ideas of colleagues here in a moment. Let's introduce our witnesses. Jocelyn Fry has been a special friend of the Finance Committee, given us good counsel for so long. She's president of the National Partnership for Women and Families, the first Black woman to head the National Partnership. She is a recognized expert on this field. And if ever there was a Wonder Woman, prepared to kind of bring people together around good ideas. It's our friend Jocelyn Fry, J.D. She's also a native of Washington, D.C., raised by two parents who also worked in government, and we appreciate her leadership. Next, Ben Verhoeven, my constituent, father of three, an important voice in Oregon as a small business owner. He's a second-generation farmer and president of Peoria Gardens, family-owned wholesale greenhouse in Albany. They specialize in flowers and vegetable starts. He's got 26 year-round employees, 24 seasonal employees, and he's made it a priority for this small business in Albany, Oregon, colleagues, to have access to paid leave. And he's going to tell us how he's making it pencil out. And that's, I think, a big part of why his contribution is so important. Then we'll have Elizabeth Melito. She's with, where is Melito? There, Ms. Melito. Great to have you, National Federation of Independent Businesses. We've worked with you all often on many issues. And then we'll have Rachel Gressler. She's a senior research fellow in economics at the Heritage Foundation. She focuses there on labor and retirement issues, including employment opportunities, and she was a senior economist at the Joint Economic Committee. She resides in Bethesda with her husband and 6 children. So we're glad you're here, all of you. Let's begin then with Ms. Fry. Welcome. And for all of you, we'll make your prepared statements a part of the record. So if you want to just summarize and kind of highlight some things that are particularly important to you, it's not only kind of more useful, it's also more fun because we can kind of get back and forth. Ms. Fry, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the committee. It's really a privilege to be here with you this morning to chat about one of my favorite topics, paid leave. The National Partnership for Women and Families is a policymaking and legal advocacy group that strives to break down gender-based barriers which prevent women, but indeed all people, from reaching their full potential. The National Partnership has a long history of working to advance paid leave, and we have a deep understanding of what works and what does not work in designing paid leave policies. We believe paid family and medical leave is a core labor standard that is necessary, it's long overdue, and essential to creating stronger workplaces and an economy of the future. Even before the pandemic, our nation's lack of comprehensive care policies undermined the full participation of women in our economy. It forced too many to choose between caring for their family and their financial security. The economic disruptions caused by the pandemic only exacerbated these problems. The lack of paid leave has negative consequences for people of all backgrounds, but its effects are most pronounced for workers who face multiple barriers and biases. Women workers, especially women of color, who are more likely to provide care, are less likely to work in jobs with paid leave. They also must navigate assumptions that the care they perform is not worthy of support or investment, and that they will just make things work on their own. Major disparities in paid leave access also exist for workers in the lowest income brackets, for workers of color, and for workers with disabilities, many of whom need medical leave to attend to ongoing health conditions, and they also need caregiving leave because they also care for family. Due to a lack of paid leave, American households miss out on $22.5 billion in wages each year. Our economy loses $650 billion a year because we have fewer women in the workforce compared to other industrialized nations. This occurs at a time when families increasingly rely on mothers, especially mothers of color, as breadwinners. There is ample evidence of paid leave's benefits. 13 states, along with the District of Columbia, have already enacted paid leave. Research in communities where paid leave has been implemented shows significant gains in the health and financial stability of workers. Businesses do report that their workforces are more productive and experience less turnover, saving employers the cost of hiring new employees and training new staff. These state-level successes offer vital lessons about some of the qualities needed in a paid leave law. An effective law must offer meaningful, sufficient benefits which are universal and guaranteed to as many workers as possible in as many employment settings as possible, so no one is left behind. It must provide enough weeks of leave and enough income to actually meet the needs of workers and enable them to afford to take time off. An effective law must be comprehensive enough to meet the full breadth of caregiving needs, not only for newborn children, but also loved ones such as aging parents and ailing spouses. And it should guarantee that paid medical leave is available for workers themselves when they face a serious health condition. Expanding care investments is not a luxury. It is an urgent need in every corner of the country. Take, for example, Tracy Wood, a speech pathologist raising 6 children in West Virginia. She's a member of one of our partners, Moms Rising. Tracy has a son with disabilities, also cares for a homebound grandparent. She used to work full-time but was forced to quit that job because it lacked paid leave. Her current contracting role doesn't offer it either. So every time she takes her son or grandparent to the doctor, she endures the added stress of knowing she's bringing home less money to feed her family. There are millions of Americans in the same position as Tracy Wood, and they worry about whether or not they will have the ability to care for themselves and their family members and secure the financial health of their families. It's a worry that springs to mind when they awake, and it keeps them up at night. And it's no wonder that 80% of voters from across the political spectrum want Congress to pass paid leave, and we do too at the National Partnership. So the time to act is now, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks very much, Ms. Fry. Every time I hear you speak, I always wait for the part where you say, look, this is not a luxury. Here are the real-life examples, and it says it so well, and we appreciate it. Mr. Verhoeven.
Good morning, Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the Senate Committee on Finance. Hello there, I'm Ben Verhoeven. I'm a second-generation farmer and nursery owner. I run a family-owned greenhouse in rural Albany, Oregon. I'm proud to say my 26 year-round and 24 seasonal employees receive great benefits, which in the big picture don't cost me much, but mean a lot to everyone, and they're good for business. My workers can get paid family leave, which covers parental leave, medical leave, and leave to care for a loved one. In addition to paid family leave, my workers can get health care, paid vacation, paid sick time, and a pension. Many industry groups claim that policies like ours will hurt business. That's just not true. Paid family leave costs me less per year than truck repairs and has a much greater effect on the lives of the people I work with. Our farm began offering 12 weeks of full pay parental leave in 2016. We have since worked to help pass paid family leave for all Oregonians. Together, we can expand these benefits to all Americans. Before my workers had paid family leave, they told me stories of draining their retirement savings to care for a dying brother. This is now a thing of the past. I know a mother who no longer must rely on donated sick time to plan for a second child. I have seen a young man raised by a single mother grow into a loving and strong father of 2. These are real stories from my workers made possible by paid family leave. In Oregon, under our state's new Paid Leave Oregon program, my farm can now provide paid family leave with my workers. Opponents of paid leave will tell you that only workers benefit, and therefore all the financial costs should fall on workers' shoulders. This is not true. As an independent business owner, I benefit when my employees do not have to choose between their loved ones and a paycheck. As a farmer, I benefit when my workers have a stable home life, which begets a stable work life. Since offering paid parental leave in 2016, we have seen a return on our investment. As valuable employees, including many fathers, return to work and future promotions. This helps my business to prosper and grow. As a business owner, I also benefit from stronger, healthier, more resilient markets. Lessening the financial hardship of an illness, a birth, or a family crisis leaves more savings in people's pockets, savings they can put towards homes and gardens. As any farmer will tell you, we are subject to the forces of Mother Nature. A crop failure affects our business the same way a sudden illness affects a family. This is why I feel strongly that coverage should be expanded to include all businesses and workers. Life events like birth, illness, and ailing parents happen to all of us, regardless of the size of company we work for. I would also add that as a farmer and a small business owner, national paid family leave is a good bargain. I cannot afford comprehensive paid family leave on my own, which is why a program like the one we have in Oregon is the best way forward. Our state's program costs businesses like mine less than offering standalone plans, and I know that my workers are also contributing. As a small business owner, I am the HR department. Our state program has been much easier to set up than the private insurance options also allowed under Oregon's new law that we explored. Working with our state has been as simple as a software update to our payroll and a pre-printed poster in the break room. Oregon's program manages the process, confirms if a worker qualifies, and of course pays for the leave itself out of the fund. This is a real service, both for me and for my workers. A comprehensive and permanent paid family leave program is good for workers, benefits employers, and secures our economy for generations. It's the right thing to do for business. It's the right thing to do for workers. Thank you.
Ben, thanks very much, and you were really on message. I was struck where you said, look, this really makes sense economically, and it frees up money for people to invest in gardens and homes. And I said, Ben's got a good message. Good work. Thanks. Let's go next with Ms. Melito.
Thank you, Chair Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, for inviting me to speak today. My name is Beth Melito, and I'm delighted to speak on behalf of the National Federation of Independent Business. NFIB is a member-driven organization that represents about 300,000 small and independent businesses across the country. Small businesses employ nearly half the country's private sector workforce, and when small businesses succeed, communities and local economies succeed. Consider the varied types of small businesses you frequent: pizza parlor, auto shop, dry cleaner, nail salon. Some have employees that are strictly hourly, some are salaried, some are part-time, some are full-time. These are the typical NFIB members, who on average have between 5 to 10 employees. Only about 12% have a human resource professional. About 50% of NFIB members do payroll in-house. I describe NFIB's membership to illustrate one of the key points of my written testimony. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all policy that works for every business or every industry. I understand the good intentions behind various proposals that mandate leave, but NFIB and its members have long opposed leave requirements for two reasons: inflexibility and cost. First, innovation and flexibility are critical to small business survival. The COVID-19 pandemic showcased small firms that thrive by innovating, pivoting, and adapting to their new circumstances. Small firms depend on flexibility, not only to boost sales and manage business operations, but to establish employee benefits, which includes paid time off. The majority of small businesses provide flexible, mutually beneficial arrangements that allow employees time off when necessary in a fiscally responsible way for that business. Small business owners recognize the value of providing paid leave to employees, since, after all, small businesses need to bid for and retain talent like all other firms, big and small. And to the extent they can, small businesses provide paid leave voluntarily to remain competitive and to attract top talent. To the extent that small firms do not offer paid leave, this reflects the reality that some small firms simply cannot financially afford to offer this benefit. If you can only afford to give your workers 10 days of paid time off and the government mandates 5 days of paid sick leave, then your employees have only 5 days left for vacation. This leads me to my second concern with leave mandates. Leave, paid or unpaid, is not a free benefit. The unanswered question with a leave mandate is, who is going to pay? There's a cost with these proposals, and not all business owners can absorb the cost. In a small business with a finite amount of resources, this means less money available for wage increases, it means less money for health insurance, and it means less money for hiring additional employees. It also means more time and money devoted to complying with workforce policies. I mentioned earlier that the small business owners typically have few administrative staff and little human resource experience. Nearly all leave mandates, paid or unpaid, impose record-keeping requirements, including leave tracking, notification, documentation, and reporting. When one state considered and adopted a paid sick leave proposal a few years ago, the legislative record was replete with opposition from small business owners. Consider this submission, quote, "We compete in a world market, and everything the state or the federal government does burdens us with more and more unfunded mandates that make us less competitive in world markets. So now I have fewer employees, and since there is not enough income after all my employment costs are met, I end up not getting paid anything for my family for all the work that I do. I could go on, but the bottom line is that we farmers don't make enough to subsidize all the wonderful benefits that you would like to see employees entitled to. I have workers asking for work, and there is plenty for them to do, but at the high costs that the state requires me to pay, I have to limit the number that I can hire. It may seem great to mandate more benefits to employees, but the hidden costs are fewer jobs. Small businesses are the lifeblood of the U.S. economy. They create 2/3 of new jobs in this country, and they account for 44% of U.S. economic activity. The government must pay more attention to supporting the health of small business and not viewing it as a source of tax revenue and the implementers of misdirected policies. Mandated leave laws represent a significant challenge for small business, since mandates are generally not flexible nor affordable. Making it more expensive to operate a small business will hamper the ability of small business survival. On behalf of the small business owners of NFIB, thank you very much for the invitation to appear today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Melito. And I'm almost tempted at this point to say we're going to send you four off on your own to work this out, and we'll supply the pizza. There was one point that you raised, Ms. Melito, that just caught my ear, where you said paid leave shouldn't be just a source of government revenue. I think what I want to do is be part of a bipartisan effort with all of my colleagues to make sure that paid leave is a source of economic growth in America and a source of help for families. That's what I hope we can do, and glad you're here, and we'll continue this conversation. Ms. Gressler, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As a mother of 6 young children and having had multiple family members battle cancer in recent years, I understand the need for leave, but not all paid family leave policies are equally helpful. The best ones are flexible policies that maximize access to leave while minimizing disruptions. Today, I'd like to discuss the current state of paid family leave, explore the differences between government and employer-provided leave, and then discuss policies that could help expand paid family leave and workplace flexibility. So first, the good news is that paid family leave has shot up over the past 6 years. Surveys show that 3 out of 4 workers have access to some type of paid family leave at work. Contrary to common belief, only 1 in 4 leaves are for the birth or adoption of a new child. Half of leaves are for a worker's own medical condition, and the other quarter are to care for a family member. While newborn and family care are particularly important, parents actually prefer workplace flexibility by a margin of 10-1 over more paid parental leave. And so the importance of flexibility leads to my second point, which is that employer-provided leave is inherently more accommodating than one-size-fits-all government programs. My niece was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when she was 18 months old. Like many medical conditions, my niece's cancer did not give advance warning, and it did not follow a predictable schedule. She endured 9 months of intensive treatments, multiple ER visits, and spent more than 60 nights in a hospital over an hour away from her home. A government program with 12 weeks of partially paid leave, a bureaucratic administrative process, and which required my sister to specify the precise days of leave that she would take in advance, did not work well for her and her husband. It was only through working directly with their employers that they were able to keep their jobs and care for their now healthy and adorable 3-year-old little girl. Some might argue that even a bureaucratic and flawed government program is better than none. But a federal government program would take away many existing programs and hinder new ones from starting. And government programs have a terrible track record at helping low-income families. In California, 5 times as many mothers in the highest income bracket file paid family leave claims with the government as those in the lowest income bracket. Canada's program is said to, quote, aid the social reproduction of higher income families. In the UK, quote, too little support is directed to the families that need it most and too much to those who do not. Moreover, while government-paid family leave programs aim to help women, they can have the unintended effects of reducing women's prospects as promotion, diminishing relative wage gains, and reducing employment. The latest version of the Family Act, which grants job-protected paid family leave to workers who've been employed for as few as 3 months, would impose huge burdens on small employers who are already struggling with labor shortages. And when a business suffers, so do its employees and the people they serve. Denmark had implemented a generous paid family leave program. A study found that it led to a 12% reduction in nursing employment, and that had huge consequences for patients. It included an 89% increase in newborn readmissions and a 13% increase in nursing home mortality. And it's important to note that the Congressional Budget Office said that the Family Act would be yet another unfunded entitlement program. Most Americans would rather have bigger paychecks to spend on what they need than smaller paychecks and a bureaucratic government maze to navigate. And that leads to my third point, which is ways that policymakers can help expand access to paid family leave without expanding the government's control over people's lives. The Working Families Flexibility Act would give lower-income workers the opportunity to choose between accumulating paid leave or overtime for the work. Universal savings accounts would enable Americans to save in one simple account that they could use for any life need without incurring a penalty. And this would be particularly helpful to lower income, to part-time workers and independent workers. And making it easier for workers to get private disability insurance could help workers meet their own needs for leave. Minimizing taxes on workers and employers would leave them with more to spend on paid family leave. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act put an additional $1,400 per year into the average household, and it led to a 4-fold increase in employer-provided paid family leave in the 6 years since that passed. And finally, policymakers can pass laws to prevent harmful labor regulations from taking away flexible work options and making it harder for employers to offer paid family leave. Unlike a one-size-fits-all federal entitlement program, these policies would help to meet workers' and employers' unique needs at a cost they can afford. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll just get on to the discussion. Mr. Verhoeven, it is almost jaw-dropping to hear you mention that offering paid leave costs less than truck repairs. Is that right?
Yes, Chairman, that is correct.
So give me the comparison, because it really is just kind of slap yourself in the forehead kind of an example.
Yeah, well, I appreciate, Chairman Wyden, thank you for the question. And yes, it does cost me less than truck repairs. It has a much greater effect on the lives of the people I work with. It is a very, very small part of our payroll and the costs that we have to do business. And for that, especially with our new government program, now not only do I have access and my workers have access to paid parental leave, they also now have access to paid medical leave, paid leave to care for a loved one, paid safe leave if someone's experiencing domestic abuse. And that's all for literally less than the cost to run my 5 trucks.
So I'm looking at the dais here, and I'm quite certain that all of my colleagues, and certainly I'll speak for myself, support write-offs for machinery, for matters like equipment and tractors and, helping small businesses like yours in Albany, Oregon make these investments. It's just common sense, and particularly in our state. where, after you cover Intel and Nike and a few others, you're done with the big businesses. We're overwhelmingly a small business state. It seems to me what you're basically saying, and I've heard some of my colleagues on both sides of this dais agree with it, is those investments in machinery are important, and equally important is to make some investments in people and sort of human capital, as well as machinery and business investments. Is that really kind of where you're going?
Chairman Wyden, thank you for the question. Absolutely, I agree. I'd actually add that in my experience, an investment in our human capital at my farm and small business pays bigger dividends than an investment in equipment. For the cost of our government paid leave program, I could go out and buy a 12-foot long conveyor, right? Or instead, I can support my workers in a moment of need. I'll know that I will I will see a tremendous return on that investment in the form of retention, promotion, and business growth.
And in Albany, I gather that you're seeing some of your other farmers experiencing the same sort of thing when they take it up.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not alone as a farmer and as a small business owner seeing the positive effects of our state and government program that offers, again, very affordable benefits to our workers and helps us retain, promote, and grow our businesses.
Well, I think the fact, and I want to just move on, that you've said investing in people from an economic standpoint. So we're not hearing discussion about we're doing it to get government revenue and all this kind of stuff. What Ben of Albany is saying is investing in people is going to pay greater dividends than any purchase of equipment. And if people take that out of here, I think that'll be a chance to start bringing our foursome together. One last question, if I might, because I know colleagues have questions as well. Ms. Fry, you've been making some good points with respect to how critical this is to economic competition and growth, particularly in China. It seems to me your organization has really been trying to drill down into that area, has some projections, for example, about the additional economic growth that would come about through paid leave. Why don't, for the remainder of my time, we give you a chance to address this issue, because every member up here, every single one of us, and sometimes multiple times a day says we got to outcompete China, and you're trying to bring the receipts, so to speak, and talk about how it generates that kind of growth.
Absolutely, Senator. Well, I think the way we do that is that we make sure that women can participate in the workforce. And the way we do that is to ensure that they have access to paid leave. And what we know is that if you had prime-age women in the workforce equal to that of some of our counterparts internationally, you could boost our economy by $650 billion, which is just under 3% in additional GDP. So we are definitely in support of that strategy of strengthening our economy.
More impressive numbers for the cause. Thank you all. Look forward to the questions. Senator Crapo.
Thank you very much. I'll start with you, Ms. Melito. In your testimony, you indicated that there is a cost to a number of these proposals. There are actually a lot of proposals out there. Some have more cost than others, and some are more based on tax policy. But could you follow up or just explore a little bit more what you mean when you say there is a cost to all these proposals, or many of them, but that not all businesses can pay that cost?
Yes, thank you, Senator, for that question. So the cost, you're right, there are a lot of proposals out there, a lot of proposals in the states and a lot of proposals at the federal level there. And I think we're here today because there's not a federal requirement for paid leave. But before I get to your question, I just want to again point out that, nearly 80% of small businesses do offer paid leave to their workers, and they do it because that's the way they retain talent, that's the way they recruit employees there. But a paid leave mandate, there is a cost because it would hinder the business owner's ability to maybe offer other benefits that are more desirable by its the employees it is trying to recruit. So for instance, a lot of small business owners I talk with, a tight labor market right now, and I hear from my members, the number one way that I recruit and retain employees is they want higher wages. That's what they want. They want higher wages. Second benefit employees are looking for is health insurance there. So if you add on something else, another required benefit from the government, then it's going to, there's going to be strain, and they're going to have to retract on one of those, either wages or potentially the health insurance there. And again, I just want to go back that most small business owners are offering paid leave right now.
Or they could, one of the other options they would have is to hire fewer employees.
That's correct too. Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Let me go to you, Ms. Gressler. Paid leave can benefit workers, as you've indicated as a mother of 6, that you personally understand. At the same time, you rightly pointed out how critical it is that these paid leave policies be flexible. Please elaborate a little bit on what flexible means in this context and how some of the national paid leave proposals would be inherently inflexible.
Yes, so flexibility is so important because parental leave for the birth of a new child, that's one thing that's relatively predictable, but most leaves are not predictable. And you need access to those benefits quickly. It's something like emailing a boss directly and saying, I'm going to be out for this. The difference between that and having to go through a bureaucratic application process, get a medical approval, and then have somebody who doesn't know who you are, doesn't know the work you do, doesn't know the workplace, be in charge of deciding when you are eligible for benefits, how much you're going to get, and to just have a strict 12 weeks, or you must specify this day, and if you do work on a day that you specified, now you have to repay it. It's just the reality of a government program not working well to meet individuals' needs versus the flexibility of an individual being able to work directly with their employer to work out what works best for each of them and also being able to keep the business running.
Well, thank you. And the chairman and I have both indicated we believe in flexibility, and if there's a way to find that bipartisan solution here, it will involve flexibility. At the end of your testimony, you went over a number of options that would be workable, and I assume that you feel that those options would have the flexibility to help build a meaningful policy. Could you just go back, even if you just go back over what you told us in your testimony, but could you go over some of the options that you believe we ought to be considering?
Yep, so each of these are an array of options. Nobody would be forced to take them, but they're something that workers could choose from based on what works best for them. And I think the most important are the ones that get at the lower income workforce. So the Working Families Flexibility Act, that's something that applies to workers who are paid hourly wages. Currently, if you are paid hourly, you are entitled to overtime pay. So if you work 45 hours in 1 week, then you actually get paid for those 5 hours at a rate of a time and a half, 7.5 hours worth of pay. So for that worker who worked an extra 5 hours, they could choose between the overtime pay or accumulating 7.5 hours of paid time off. It's a pure choice, nobody has to take it, and the employer can't force them to. Also, universal savings accounts. Just having that access to one account that you're not fearful about putting money in because if your car breaks down tomorrow, you might not be able to access it. But if you have one account that can be used for all of life's purposes, people will be more likely to save. That's been shown in other countries that have implemented these. And then you have that safety net there, whether it's for paid family leave, for childcare, or whatever expense comes up. Also, private disability insurance. About half of workers have that now. You could allow employers to auto-enroll their workers into private disability insurance, just specify that that's something they can do like they do for 401ks, and that could increase their access to that workplace benefit.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator Crapo. Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Crapo. This is such an important discussion, and we've talked about it for years, but never seemed to actually do what needs to be done for families and for women who are their primary ones juggling what's happening for themselves and in their families, both children and parents and everything in between. And at the same time, we need them in the workforce. And so there are many challenges. I do want to say, I do have want to start with Mr. Van Hoeven, but I did want to say that Ms. Gressler, in listening to your options, my concern is that, for instance, with low-income workers, you say, well, you can work overtime and then choose to get paid for overtime, or you can work overtime and choose not to get paid for overtime and get paid family leave. It seems to me they ought to, if they work overtime, get paid for overtime and also have family leave. So those don't sound great, like great choices for low-income people as I'm listening, but I certainly support flexibility. There's no question. But Mr. Verhoeven, as chair of the Agriculture Committee, I have to say I smile in thinking about you as a family farm running a family-owned greenhouse in Albany, Oregon, and the way you are approaching this for your workers. All the time we hear about the need for workers everywhere, certainly, and in agriculture. We hear the desperate need for workers. And in every area, certainly we see this in Michigan as well. Could you speak a little bit more about how the program works in Oregon? Because we certainly see paid family leave as pro-workers, pro-families. You're saying it's also pro-business, which I believe that it is, and that it can be structured in a way that's not costly, because certainly for small businesses in particular, that's a huge issue of being able to afford to be able to do something like this. But universal paid family and medical leave in Oregon, what does that look like for you? How is that structured?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Our government program in Oregon makes it tremendously affordable for me to offer these kinds of benefits, really comprehensive benefits to my employees. Again, it's less than truck repairs. They get paid family leave, which includes paid parental leave, care for time to care for a loved one, paid medical leave, and paid safe leave. And as an employer, for that small investment, I get a big return in the terms of retention, promotion, business growth. And I'd also add that it's been really, really simple to set up. I can't afford this kind of comprehensive paid family leave on my own. Our government program makes it really easy to do that, and it makes it easy to set up. It really is as simple as a software update to our payroll, a poster in the break room. That leaves me with a lot more time to do what my day job is, which isn't here in front of you guys. It's growing flowers, for garden centers. And I know I can rest assured that the government is managing the program, confirms if a worker qualifies, and of course pays for the leave itself out of the program. That's a real service and a value to me, my farm, my small business, and certainly my workers.
Is this done in a matching funds or through the tax code? What does that look like?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Our Oregon program is done through payroll tax. So as an employer, I pay 4/10 of 1/100th of my payroll. So that's
say that again. 4/10.
4/10 of 1/100th
Okay.
of my payroll, a fraction of a fraction. That's 4/1000 of my payroll. And for that small amount, my workers also contributed 6/10 of 1/100th of their pay. So while it's not free, right? But I would argue it's a really, really good bargain, because for that they're getting access to paid parental leave, medical leave, caregiving leave, and I get better retention.
And are you finding, I assume, that you keep workers longer?
Yes,
that
absolutely.
in terms of retention and the quality of the workers and so on, that this, I would assume, pays dividends on the farm and with your business.
Yes, Senator, thank you for the question. We absolutely see better retention, opportunities for promotion, and of course, that leads to business growth for me and my farm.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think we might just want to put Ben in charge of bringing everybody together and working this out. He's got it down, and he's an Oregonian. Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to represent the great state of New Jersey, which was the second state in the country to pass a paid family leave program in 2008, and then our state expanded the program in 2019. Our paid leave program has helped countless families, and 71% of all New Jersey households with children, more than 1.3 million homes, all parents have paying jobs, and more than 100,000 children are born each year in New Jersey. The state legislation created a paid leave program that guarantees all workers 12 weeks of family leave, with the lowest wage workers receiving 85% of their pay. And this legislation, I believe, should be an example for the country. Ms. Fry, what are the biggest success and lessons from New Jersey's paid family leave program that we should consider as we push for national paid leave legislation?
Thank you so much, Senator, for that question. And you're right that there's lots of good research on the effectiveness of New Jersey's program. It was the second in the country. And what we know is that it's really helped with some of the things we've already talked about: labor force participation and retention, particularly for women workers. There's data that shows greater retention of workers who are family caregivers. There is very good research from employers that shows that for the most part, employers say it's either improved morale or productivity, or at worst, it's neutral. So there's lots of good research that shows that the law has been able to both provide a benefit that people needed, but also to make sure that employers can manage it and manage it well.
Yep, so human capital, which is essential. We have 10 to 11 million jobs in the country that go unfulfilled. So creating greater access to that human capital for productivity to take place, as well as higher performance. Those are things that the private sector would want to see as much as any benefit to the individual families. Isn't that true?
Well, it's why we think that paid leave is a win-win.
Right.
And I think when you look at all of the states increasingly, and as Senator Wyden said, there are 14 now, including the District of Columbia, one of the reasons that paid leave is growing is because you do see those benefits for workers and for employers.
So I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of Senator Gillibrand's Family Act, which would guarantee all workers access to 12 weeks of paid leave, and I look forward to working with her to make it happen. Latinos and Latinas are far less likely to have access to paid leave than others. And nationally, Latinos are 66% less likely to have paid leave compared to white workers. This inequality makes it harder for Latinos to spend time with a new child or take care of a sick parent. To add insult to injury, it also forces many Latinas to drop out of the workforce altogether when they have a child, contributing to the monumental wage gap we see between Latinas and white men. As we know, it takes a Latino worker an average of 2 years to equal what white non-Hispanic males are paid in 1 year. So, Ms. Fry, why is national paid leave legislation so vital for Latino families?
Well, you've recounted some of the challenges here, and Latino workers generally disproportionately work in jobs where there's no paid leave. That is true for, in particular, low-paying jobs, many in the service sector. So a lot of times Latino workers simply don't have access to leave because of the jobs that they work in. In addition, as you mentioned, with Latinas in particular, there is an enormous wage gap. And what we know about the wage gap from people like Nobel Prize winner Claudia Golden is that there's several different drivers of the wage gap. One of it is discrimination, one is occupational segregation, and the other is the lack of work-family policies like paid leave and childcare. So when you have paid leave, you enable folks to actually stay in the workforce longer. It enables them to not only earn wages but grow wages. And that's why, paid leave and work-family policies are so critical to helping to close the wage gap. Latinas have one of the largest wage gaps. They earn 52 cents for every dollar white male makes. That is an enormous gap, and we need to close it.
Yeah. And finally, Mr. Verhoeven, is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah, Verhoeven, but it's close enough. Don't worry.
We want to get it right, especially when you're from the chairman's state. You similarly talk about the benefits of paid leave as a small business owner. Of course, when an employee is away, it costs strains on a small business, but it's far worse if an employee is forced to leave the business because of a lack of family and medical leave. What's been the biggest success of the Oregon paid leave program for your business?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. The biggest success is it's a tremendous bargain. Again, it costs us less than truck repairs, and I get a really big return on that investment in terms of retention, promotion, and business growth. I see my workers with more stable home lives, and that equates to more stable work lives at our farm.
Thank you. And in order of appearance, next, our friend from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Verhoeven, I think one of the reasons why we're struggling with your name is we have a Senator Hoeven here. So a quick question for you. Is the program funded through employer and employee payroll deductions, or is it subsidized by the state as well? In other words, is it fully funded through the payroll tax deductions or not?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. In our state of Oregon, the government program is funded through payroll taxes, and again, it's less than truck repairs.
So it purely is.
Yes,
so
correct.
They've created a revenue pool that it's funded out of those resources, no other subsidies required. That's good.
Yes, that's my understanding, correct.
I had a question for Ms. Melito. I'm trying to, North Carolina, various states have gone about this differently. We have this for state employees. We do not have it as anything mandatory for businesses. What are the trends that we're seeing? COVID had a lot of bad things, but it had some good things. I mean, we're addressing work-life balance, a number of other policies, but what could we do short of creating a large, potentially complex, because everything at the federal government is large and complex. And so all of a sudden we go to small businesses, and I remember in banking committee, we were having a hearing where someone was talking about, this is a small program, it's only a 4 or 5 page form that a small business needs to fill out. I don't think people understand how chilling that is to a small business where, Mr. Verhoeven, you're probably the CEO, the chief marketing officer, the chief financial officer. You're running a lot of your business. So I'm in the mode of let's get paid family leave out there, but let's do it in the most light-handed manner possible. So can you all give me any ideas or trends, Ms. Melito, on particularly for small businesses, what's occurring now? What are the market demands, the competition for labor, everything else going out there? How much of the gap is being filled there, and to what extent does the federal government need to be involved?
Thank you for that question, Senator. So I will say, you've heard a lot about flexibility here, but I would also say any proposal policy should be simple. So keep it simple. And, I'll go back to Mr. Verhoeven, and I apologize, I probably mispronounced that too. But, you mentioned in Oregon, it was, a matter of updating your software. And a lot of NFIB members are still doing payroll manually. So then, again, that would be, more complexity added there too. The carrot is always better than the stick there, so allowing more flexibility. And I will, you mentioned the COVID and government policies that came out then. You probably might recall the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which mandated a leave and offered a tax credit, but the tax credit, claiming the credit was really complicated. And the NFIB survey or research center found afterwards that only 43% of small employers who had employees take that FFCRA leave claimed the credit. It's just complicated. Most of our members use a tax preparer. So they're doing payroll in-house, sometimes still manually, but they are using a tax preparer. So, awareness on the part of sort of the tax preparer community on any sort of tax, credit is also very important there. So, that's long-winded answer to your question, but simplicity is very, very important. And the carrot is more important than the stick. Thank you.
I agree. Ms. Gressler, I pronounced that name right? Tell me a little bit about government programs that, in your view, are falling short and what more we need to do.
Yeah, I think the reality of government programs is they can't eliminate the costs. They can't reduce the costs. They can simply redistribute the costs. Mm-hmm. And when you hear, I've been in discussions with HR managers at large companies, and they have said that complying with these state-based programs has been so difficult, and they've ended up telling workers you can take leave, and then they had to pay it back. And they said if we didn't have to deal with these, we would be providing so much more. And so I think that's the problem, is a government program actually going to help the workers that need the help the most? And I think that that's where the evidence is saying no. It's not getting to the lower income workers who don't have access to leave because it's a burdensome process. It's burdensome for employers. Ms. Melito was looking at that credit for the businesses. The JCT thought it would cost over $100 billion. It cost $6 billion because businesses simply didn't apply for it. Having to do that, go through the process and fill out these forms, and if that's burdensome for a business owner, how much more burdensome is it for the low-income worker who's also managing the medical condition for the leave? And so I think anything that happens has to keep the relationship between the employer and the employee so that they can flexibly work things out. And that might not look like a formal written policy that's measured by the BLS to say you have access, but it nevertheless is having the ability to be able to take leave in a way that works for both the worker and the employer.
Thank you all. I'm sorry my time's expired. I had questions for all of you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank my colleague. Next in order of appearance is Senator Hassel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Crapo, and to our witnesses for being here today. There is strong public support for a national paid leave program, and I'm encouraged that there's growing bipartisan support in Congress because the current patchwork system isn't working. It's not working for families, and it's not working for our businesses and our economy. Without access to comprehensive guaranteed paid leave, many hardworking Americans are forced to reduce their hours or leave their jobs altogether when they welcome a child into their family, when they go through their own medical emergencies, or when they need to care for a sick family member or aging parents. So I want to start with a question to you, Ms. Fry. It was very good to see you last week. As we discussed in our meeting, many Granite Staters struggle because they don't have guaranteed paid family and medical leave. For instance, I've met with Carrie Duran in Wolfboro, a single parent of 3, who served as a caregiver to her father who had Alzheimer's until his passing in 2019. With no paid leave, in order to take her father to critical medical appointments, Carrie had to forgo hours of pay, choosing between caregiving and critical financial support for her family. She continues to struggle with lack of access to paid leave as she cares for her daughter who has complex medical needs, juggling part-time jobs at a financial cost. Ms. Fry, I'm sure that you've heard stories like Carrie's throughout the country. How can comprehensive paid leave help people like her who are in a position of caring for their parents, children, or other loved ones?
Well, thank you, Senator. I think, you really hit the nail on the head that comprehensive paid leave is comprehensive, and it recognizes that what paid leave may look like for one person and the need for one person is different for another. What we know, and I think Ms. Gressler, said this, is that a very small percentage, not very small, but less than a quarter of the leaves that are taken under the FMLA, for example, are for parental purposes. The majority of leave is for personal, and a little over a quarter is for family care. So you need comprehensive leave to ensure that a person like your constituent can actually take the time that they need to care for their parent. I had a similar issue when I was on staff at the National Partnership and had to take my dad to chemotherapy. So you need that type of flexibility.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Another question, which has to do with our service members who are in the National Guard and Reserves. They lack access to the parental leave that they need to care for and bond with their children after birth, adoption, or foster care placement. At a time when we are seeing recruiting and retention challenges across the military, we need to act swiftly to remove barriers so that parents will continue to serve in the military. That's why Senator Murkowski and I are pushing to ensure that our bipartisan reserve component Parental Leave Parity Act is included in this year's National Defense Authorization Act. Our bill will strengthen the military and support families by expanding parental leave to fathers and adoptive and foster parents serving in the reserves and National Guard. Ms. Fry, why is it critical for our military readiness and strength to ensure that all new parents in the military have access to leave?
Well, it's critical to support our service members across the board, and that means not only service members who need to take time off because they're about to have a child, but also parents who are, maybe a spouse is having a child as well. And I so appreciate the legislation that you and Senator Murkowski are working on. What we know is having that time off, particularly for a new mom or new parent, is essential for bonding, for strengthening their family. It's particularly important when you have service members who are doing long deployments. The time that they are able to have with their families is critical. We know that our military readiness is connected to service members believing that their families are okay. So we have a duty, I think, as a nation to make sure that they have the tools available to them to make sure their families are as strong as possible.
Well, I appreciate that very much. I see my time is almost up, so I will submit one more question to Mr. Verhoeven for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. I thank my colleague. Next is Senator Casey.
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much.
Worked on these issues for a long time.
Thank you. Thanks for working on this issue with us, and thanks for having this hearing. I don't think anyone needs to hear again, but it bears repeating, how important paid leave is for families, whether they're starting a new family or whether they're families with older adults, families with members with disabilities or significant medical needs. The Department of Labor tells us that 20% of people take unpaid FMLA leave, do so to care for a non-newborn family member with a serious health condition. That's a lot of families, a lot of people. Family members leave their jobs or reduce their work hours to care for a newborn and a newly adopted child, to provide ongoing care for a family member with a disability or to care for their aging parents. So it runs the gamut from one end of the age scale to the other. A constituent of mine, Barbara Gurley, came to our office to talk about her caregiving experience for her late husband. She was talking about how often he fell and the challenges that she had making sure that they could take care of him before he passed away. The Gurley family had insurance but could not access any paid support for the work she was doing, and they made too much money for local social services. If there had been a paid leave program in place, Barbara could have taken paid time off to care for her husband when he really needed it. So we know this is real hard work, caregiving. And Mr. Van Hoeven, you testified that before the new paid leave law in Oregon came into effect, you had an employee who was, quote, draining their retirement savings to care for a dying brother. Can you tell us more about how workers like Barbara Gurley and your employee will be affected by a new comprehensive paid leave law that you have in place in Oregon?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Yes, our government program makes it really affordable for me as a small business owner to offer now comprehensive paid family leave, so that no longer is just parental leave, but includes the kind of caregiving leave you're talking about, medical leave and then safe leave. And that's really at the crux of it for us is, as a small business owner, without our government program, I couldn't offer those kinds of things. My workers couldn't benefit from it. The kind of benefits that they receive make it easier for them to have a stable home life, which makes it easier for them to have a stable work life. That's good for them. It's also good for me as a small business owner and as a farmer. If they're stable at home, stable at work, I can see better retention, promotion, business growth.
Thanks very much. And finally, Ms. Fry, if you have any data, I wanted you to share, if you could, how often and when workers need to take time to care for family members other than newborns or newly adopted children. Any national perspective on that or data?
Well, what we know from the data is about a quarter of the time the leave is taken for things that are not self-medical or related to the birth or adoption of a child. So a significant percentage. And what we also know is that family caregiving is often the type of caregiving that is left out of other policies. You know, people may have access sometimes to vacation or so forth, but it's really the family caregiving that often is the missing piece, which is why comprehensive leave is so important. We know 1 in 7 caregivers, for example, report that they've had to either cut back on their hours or drop out of work because they didn't have access to family caregiving leave. We know that women over 50 who've had to drop out of the workforce because they didn't have access to caregiving leave lose on average almost $300,000 over the course of their careers because they've had to drop out of the workforce. So it's a significant impact.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank my colleague. Senator Cassidy is next, and he also has spent a long, long time working on this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, just a comment, although you've all pointed out that it's a large fraction, but not the complete amount of those who take family leave because of adoption or of having a child. Senator Sinema and I have a bill which would allow the pull forward of a portion of a of a child tax credit to allow a lump sum payment of $5,000 at the birth of our adoption. And the parent can use it either as income replacement if she chooses to stay home, or if he chooses to stay home, or they can use it for child care if they choose to go back to work. Yes, they are losing $500 in subsequent years from their child tax credit. On the other hand, as we all know, studies show that if a woman stays attached to the workforce, her future income growth is such that it more than makes up this $500 she's losing in subsequent years. I spoke about that fast, but if anybody wants more information, I'd love to give it to them. More importantly, I think it's something that can be possibly paid for. And I say that because right now, sir, you mentioned of the de minimis almost payroll tax, but we have a president who won't support any tax on anybody less than $400,000, even if it's to save Social Security. Now, we've first got to line up our priorities. We've got to make sure that Social Security don't go bankrupt, and right now we've had no commitment to making that happen. And the old saw about let's just tax those who make over $400,000 a year, I'll point out that the president has proposed over $4 trillion in those who make over $400,000 a year, and none of that money is going to this sort of payroll program. So on the federal level, we have to say, yes, it's great that Oregon has done this. On the federal level, I don't see a path forward in terms of raising the payroll tax. Ms. Gressler, though, and Ms. Melito, when I researched this a few years ago, as I was working on this with Senator Sinema, the research I did at the time said that most people, this is several years ago, so with inflation it would be higher, but most workers who make over $70,000 a year have paid leave of some sort. Now, it might be paid vacation day or personal days. It wasn't per se paid leave, but it was time they could take off if their parent were sick or if their child were sick or if they had a child. Is that still the case? And I know that because I don't know the answer to this because it's been a while since I've looked at this. Ms. Gressler?
Yes, I suspect it's gone up even more since then. The latest data we have is from 2018, and that shows that about 73% of workers across all income levels report that they have access to some type of paid leave for an FMLA condition at work. And I think that
But to Ms. Fry's point, and to your point, we can imagine that that's going to be principally people who make above a certain income level. The woman who's behind the counter at the convenience store, she has a lower wage and probably an hourly wage and a more tenuous employment circumstance. So again, is this not disproportionately those who are upper income?
It's still disproportionately those that are upper income, but we have seen the most significant growth in paid family leave policies in those lower income groups over recent years.
That's great. Now, why have you seen that growth has happened? Because of the policies that have been advocated, such as in Oregon, or what?
No, the growth that we've seen, and I mentioned it, increased sixfold. If you look at the 6 years before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed versus the 6 years since then, the percentage of workers as formally measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistic that are looking at employer policies only, That's where we've seen that six-fold increase. And it's companies like Lowe's, Starbucks, Chipotle that typically are employing lower income workers.
So let me stop you there, because I also was struck when I did this research a few years ago, that some companies like Google, Deloitte, and others were in California providing paid leave as a company policy. And then when California put in their program, they actually pulled back on their business offered paid leave, and they discharged the obligation to the taxpayer. And so on net, there's no increased benefit to the worker. There is just less obligation on the case of businesses. Is that a common thing, or is that only California?
That's exactly what happens with these state policies. It's a windfall benefit to the employer that already provides a policy. They send their workers to the state program first. Once they've used up all of those benefits and had to go through that burdensome application process, then the employer will top them up to bring them to the same level that they had been before. So the worker has to go through two programs to get the same thing that they were.
Now, let me ask you, though, I'm also told that Washington State did it in such a way that avoided that. And again, I'm just telling you this because I've been told that, not because I know details. Can you comment on is my understanding of the Washington State program that it avoided this kind of zero sum for the employee, but a windfall for the employer?
I believe they have a process where the employer can get a qualification to just run their own program and to opt out of that. And that is something that I would encourage any state or government policy to do, is to allow an opt-out for employers who are already providing a minimum level of paid family leave.
Well, I had questions for you all, but I'm out of time, so thank you all.
I thank my colleague, and my colleague has been working in good faith on this for a long time, and just want to make a quick point while it's relevant to the debate. It just strikes me as you shouldn't have to sacrifice the child tax credit to get paid leave when you have a child. And that's especially true when Ben has given us a path to basically say, hey, look, we can offer paid leave that costs less than truck repairs. So we got a lot of work to do to try to bring this together. I'm going to work very closely with Senator Cassidy. He's put in a lot of time on this, and I appreciate it. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the ranking member for this great conversation. It has been very enlightening as well. And let me just ask Elizabeth Melito. Oregon has a paid leave program. Did the National Federation of Independent Businesses oppose that program, that statewide program, and do they still?
Yes,
Why?
NFIB did.
Why?
Our members, we are member-driven, and our members took a look at it and opposed it. It was not the right thing for them. It does not offer flexibility. It's a one-size-fits-all. So it's challenging. Again, not all businesses are created equal, and there's a cost associated with it.
And the harm to the businesses, can you explain, is it harmful in the sense that it put some folks out of business, small businesses couldn't afford the cost?
So a couple things. There's the payroll cost there, so there is a cost on the business, so there's an employer side payroll cost there too. Okay. There is the record keeping, the administrative burden there, because there is some burden on the employer with adapting their payroll system to account for it there too. They also need to become familiar with the program, so there's a learning curve there too with familiarity, so they can answer their employees' questions about the program there. Okay. And then there is also too the potential, for workers to take extended leave and the strain on other employees. Not that an employer would necessarily not offer the leave. They probably, again, as I said before, I keep saying, most small business owners do offer a paid leave program, but it might be a PTO program, so it's all sort of in one bucket there, not necessarily as formalized, a formal policy there. So.
And the Oregon law didn't exempt or carve out those small businesses that already have a different form of paid leave?
It did not.
Okay.
No, to my knowledge, it did not, but yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Verhoeven, I'm curious, your examples, or can you talk a little bit about how you perceive the Oregon program, and did you see those challenges as well, or I'm just interested in the state program?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. I do not see those challenges. Again, I'm a small business owner. I'm the HR department, and our working with our government program has been as easy as a software update to our payroll system and a poster in the break room. It's made it incredibly simple for me to afford the kind of benefits that I otherwise couldn't and offer them to my workers to, again, build that stability in their home, which gives me stability in the workplace and leads to retention, improved retention, opportunities for promotion, and growth for my business.
And how many employees do you have?
I have 26 full-time employees, myself included, and we hire about 24 seasonally.
And is it safe to say that a smaller business that has 15 or less employees might have a margin, a profit margin that is really slim and not able to accommodate some of these costs? Is that true or no? Just for the panelists, I'm going to open it up to the panelists.
Yeah, I think the costs are definitely an issue, and it's a bigger burden for smaller businesses. But something that we haven't looked at a lot is beyond the dollar cost. It's the ability of the business to keep managing its operations. And that's what's particularly burdensome if you're a smaller employer and you can't just pull somebody else in and share the work with you. But they found that they had so many people fill their mission, and so they actually had to pull that back. And so that's the difficult needle to thread here, is how can you have a policy that is providing good benefits, but also enabling the employer to keep managing their operations. And that's where you need to be able to have ways that you can pull new workers in without
the flexibility
yes,
that you
exactly.
talked about. So I only have about a minute left, but I know President Trump in his budget proposed to have states provide 6 weeks of paid leave to new parents through their existing state unemployment insurance trust funds. While I think there could be promise in helping states expand paid leave, this proposal didn't include any federal support and left all the details to the states, which I question whether that helps those states, particularly for those less affluent states. If they don't have federal support, they're going to be able to do this. So I guess my question to the panel is, looking at this flexibility, looking at what the state's done, should there be federal support as well as part of this? Should it be both state and federal support coming in to address the paid leave? And let me start with Ms. Fry, because it looks like you have an answer.
Yeah, no, I will quickly say that you're absolutely right that I think we need a federal program. I mean, that was proposed during the Trump administration and during the Clinton administration. They had a similar, a closely similar program that would have tapped UI. And the problem is that sometimes those funds simply aren't sufficient, which is why a national program that actually is comprehensive is the preferred strategy.
Okay. Ms. Gensler, I know my time is up. Ms. Gensler, Mr. Chair, if she can answer this question, we'll be done.
Yes, just real quick, I think the worst thing would be to have a state and a federal program, because then they could potentially conflict and overlap and make it more difficult. It's a promising option, and I see it as a good one to be a true safety net to use the state's unemployment insurance programs, because that's really going to get at the workers who don't have access to a program at work and who tend to be the lower income ones. So I think that is one option. You would clearly have to, increase the tax on employers to fund that.
I thank my colleague, Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to each of you for your testimony today. I think, Mr. Chairman, we have the power panel. I like this, 3 women, 1 guy. But a great topic for women to be leading on. In Tennessee, I visit with each of our 95 counties every year. And this is your county and city and town mayors and local elected officials and small business owners. And to a person, the issue that regularly comes up is workforce. And how do you keep your workforce, lack of available workers, to fill current job openings? And they're all concerned with this. And one of the things that I have found is that employers want to provide better benefits for their employees. And they talk about the need to do that because they want to keep them after they get them trained. And Ms. Melito, let me come to you, because Tennessee recently passed a new voluntary law, and it's called the Tennessee Paid Family Leave Insurance Act. And this amends the insurance code in the state and establishes paid family leave insurance. So you now have a paid family leave insurance as a new line of insurance that insurers can offer in Tennessee. And how important is it, and that your federal and state law allows employers to have that flexibility to opt in and to offer and to make a benefit like that available?
Thank you for that question, Senator Blackburn. I mean, something like that removes sort of the economic strain on a business from offering, a benefit is something that certainly we would be open to exploring at NFIB and hearing more about, and making, that would allow the benefit to be more widely available to employees too. I think that's a great thing. We keep hearing this number, 70% of Americans want paid leave, but then when you ask if it means a smaller paycheck, 60% oppose. So, I mean, to your point there, the costs are a concern for both employers and employees too. So if there's a way to get at it, that is, again, removes the economic strain from employers and employees, that could be a very good thing. So thank you.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about the cost of offering a federally mandated leave and also the impact on the workforce. One thing we've not really touched on, I'd love to hear you, and Ms. Melito, I'll stay with you, is talk about the compliance cost that is there on workforce laws, and what would that do to increasing compliance cost for small business owners?
And that's a great question, because just about every leave proposal that I have reviewed, state or federal, does have compliance. There's record keeping, there's notification. So it might just be, here in Oregon, it sounds like it's a poster on the break room, but in other states, I believe in California, you have to hand out a brochure and a poster and notification. And there are potential penalties associated in some of the states if you don't provide that, so sort of a cause of action for the employee if that's not given. This goes back to the simplicity thing there. Small business owners don't have a professional HR person in most instances there. They're like Mr. Verhoeven. They are the HR person. So there is usually, again, almost always, I've always seen a record keeping, and that's time for the business owner. And then there's liability risk too if you don't do it right. So thank you.
All right, let me, Ms. Gressler, let me come to you. What about unintended consequences that could result from changing the idea of something that's considered a benefit that employers can offer to something that is federally mandated and that the government mandates employees have to have this? So what would be the unintended consequences of making that flip?
I think the unintended consequences there is that you get a more rigid structure that doesn't work very well for most people. If 3 out of 4 workers who are taking leave are taking it for their own medical condition or caring for a family member, those aren't things that are usually anticipated, and they're often not things that fit nicely into a 12 weeks fully off, back on the job the next day. It's often caring for an elderly parent that might be needing to be home, but not constantly needing to be with them, so maybe a remote option is something that would work. Or taking an elderly parent 1 day a week to a doctor's appointment. Those things don't fit into the government programs.
Okay, so then leaving it as a benefit for employers to provide, like Tennessee has done, with an insurance option that is there, and having that line of insurance, that allows the flexibility that employees want, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's something that an employee could opt into themselves, or the business can choose to offer it, and nobody would necessarily have to pay for it if they don't want to.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank my colleague, and my colleague is raising issues that need to be debated. For those of you who are just coming in, and we've had discussions most recently about rigid structures and the like, something like 2 hours ago, Mr. Van Hooven of Albany, Oregon, basically said he could offer paid leave for less than it costs for truck repairs. So that doesn't suggest to me that we're arming up for some kind of huge, rigid kind of structure, and I still like the idea of putting all 4 of you together to work this thing out. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So women workers saw steep job losses during the pandemic. And while women's labor force participation has bounced back, it's been stuck at 10 points lower than men's labor force participation for the past quarter of a century. And that's because women still bear the burden of care work. They take care of children, they take care of sick relatives, they take care of parents with disabilities. And that means that too often, women workers, and particularly women of color, must choose between getting paid or doing caring for a loved one. A key way to address this problem is through a national paid family and medical leave program, so all workers have the support they need to balance work and caregiving responsibilities. Now, some states, including Massachusetts, have already set up their own paid family and medical leave programs. Ms. Fry, how does Massachusetts' paid leave program work? Can you just explain to everyone how we're set up?
Sure, absolutely, Senator. Thank you. Massachusetts has a very strong program. They've been able to make use of some of the best practices across the country. It offers 12 weeks of paid leave for family reasons, I think 20 weeks for medical purposes. They have progressive wage replacement, so lower wage workers get more of their pay, about 80%, which is significant, and it has job protection, so that people, if they take leave, their job is protected. So it's an important program. It also allows additional time for military service members as well.
Yeah, and as I understand it, we cover the overwhelming majority of our workers in Massachusetts with this program. And are workers in Massachusetts actually using the program? What do you see, Ms. Fry? Especially women.
Absolutely. What we know from the early data is that the majority of people who've taken claims are women, a little over 60%. More than half of those women have been taking it for their own personal leave. So it's working, and that's important. That's exactly what we want in a program.
Good. So we've got it. It's a robust program. People are using it. And the program is relatively new in Massachusetts, but in looking at data from other states that have paid leave programs for years, the impact seems to be pretty clear. Ms. Fry, in states like Massachusetts that have paid leave programs, do we see positive economic outcomes both for workers and for businesses?
Well, that's why it's so important. We definitely see positive outcomes in terms of labor force participation. It allows folks to stay longer, retain their jobs, grow their wages, which is exactly what we want. Our priority is keeping women in the labor market because it supports them and it supports their families. Women are increasingly breadwinners. 2/3 of moms are breadwinners, even higher for Black and Latina moms. More than 85% of Black mothers are breadwinners in their families. So it's so critical to have that labor force attachment. And it also helps to close the wage gap. That I said earlier, what we know in Massachusetts in particular, there's a significant wage gap, and this is one of the strategies to help fix it.
This is terrific. I really appreciate your explaining all of this. Paid leave helps families improve their economic security, and it's good for businesses at the same time because we get higher workforce participation when we do this. Clearly, there is a need for leave programs, especially for women workers. But the state you live in shouldn't determine whether you can take off time from work to care for a sick family member at the same time that you're trying to put food on the table. We need a national paid leave program. President Biden has called for it. It is time for Congress to act on this. Thank you again. I yield, Mr. Chair.
Thank my colleagues. I don't want you all to think that I'm beginning to filibuster, but I've got a couple of colleagues who may be on the way. So there are a couple of questions that I do think is kind of relevant to the debate. We haven't said much about rural communities, and this dais has a lot of senators with substantial rural terrain. Ms. Fry, you've looked into this issue, I gather, and are there some barriers that rural communities face in terms of paid leave?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One is that, oftentimes in rural communities, they just have access to less services. They have to go farther. If you have somebody who has a care need, it's more stressful in terms of being able to access the care that they need or having to drive people to appointments and things like that. So having the ability to take time to maybe take somebody to a city that's 1 hour away for a specialized appointment is really critical. It's exactly what families need in particular. The other thing that we know is that rural workers tend to be lower paid workers. They are often disproportionately in lower wage jobs, and many of those jobs don't provide access to paid leave. So, having a national program that enables workers across the workforce, regardless of where they reside, to still have access to a leave benefit is particularly important.
All right. In the continuation of our hopes that our colleagues will arrive, let me also state a procedural matter, and that is all senators and staff have to get their questions in by next Wednesday, November 1st at 5 p.m. Tell me a little bit, and I'll ask you this, Ms. Melito, because we've worked with you all on a variety of issues. As you know, I had a bipartisan health reform bill, Healthy Americans Act, 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans. We said, look, the Democrats have an important point. It was universal, coverage, because if you don't have universal coverage, too much cost shifting. And the Republicans had a legitimate point as well about some marketplace kind of forces. And I'm looking at the 4 of you, and I'm saying, hey, let's figure this thing out. I mean, just listening to you over the last, whatever it's been, 2 hours, I hear that a number of colleagues that we invited have been very sympathetic to the flexibility issue. My hope is that as folks in the business community who are thinking about what to do and this concern about rigid structures would say, why in the world can't we get this help to people of modest means? I mean, that's how I started 2 hours ago. The discussion is when people ask me, why are we doing this, is that, firefighters and cashiers and all these people who really are of very modest, kind of means. They work hard, they want to work hard, but at the same time, when life intervenes, they got to be there for their families. So because you all have been involved in kind of coalitions and efforts to try to bring together people with responsible policy, and to me, policy is not about taking each other's crummy ideas. I think that conservatives make legitimate points on flexibility, and I think progressives have legitimate points with respect to how important the human need is here. So you've been working on this a while. What's the path here to break the gridlock? By the way, when we started on some issues around here, Senator Crapo and I were told we didn't have a prayer in the world of moving them, and we've been able, because we've got a lot of colleagues here who believe in the sharp pencil theory, and tell us how we get this done.
So thank you, Senator. So you're right. Yeah, we definitely see there seems to be an awareness about the need for flexibility with small business owners, and what works for one business might not work so well for another business there. And I would just, ask that your colleagues also build an awareness of the costs on small business too. So for instance,
but you're saying, and I share this view, I'm sympathetic to flexibility. I mean, I think one of you said something, well, this is being done for getting government revenue or some such thing. Not on my watch. On my watch, this is being done for 2 reasons. For economic growth, because we desperately need that. That's what fuels, innovation, and helping families. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's what flexibility is all about. What do you say to your colleagues on that end of the table with respect to getting help and actually making sure it gets to them without having to give up, other, assistance if they're of modest means and they got to help their family?
So proposals, I think, need to start modestly and, transposing, for instance, what Oregon has done nationwide. Ms. Gressler could speak more to the potential cost for that, but, I say that there's a lot of people and NFIB members that are not willing to absorb that cost.
I didn't talk about,
And it's and the creation of another federal entitlement program. Is that something, that my members would support, they would not?
I didn't talk
Yeah.
about taking anybody's model. I'm talking about trying to get people to say, look, let's get serious about actually resolving it. And when my constituent comes in and says, we can do paid leave for less than we're spending on truck repairs, I think there's a lane here that I've heard senators on both sides talk about where human capital, needs of people counts as much as the very important investments that I support for your members in terms of, equipment and machinery and the like. So that's my final refrain. Senator Whitehouse will ask his questions and we'll wrap up. But let's say that this floor is a powerhouse panel, and let's continue this conversation and find a path to actually making this happen on our watch. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much. Let me start, if I may, by highlighting a Rhode Island paid leave story. Not everybody has an equal share of good and bad luck in this life. And this story is a woman who's got 3 kids. Her oldest is 15, medically fragile, nonverbal, and receives ICU-level care at home. He's been hospitalized twice. And because his mom has paid family leave, she is able to stay with him during some of these crises. And by virtue of her being there, that keeps him out of the hospital, lowering healthcare costs for all of us, in addition to, I think, being a pretty fair and decent thing to do for a woman who's already carrying a pretty heavy burden of need in her family. So, to quote the mom, expanding this program is crucial to supporting families during difficult times. And so I'm very supportive of it for that reason. Ms. Fry, how do you rate providing family leave in terms of overall economic growth? Does it add value to the economy, or is it a deadweight loss on the economy to provide workers with paid family leave?
Well, Senator, I think you'll not be surprised to hear me say that it certainly adds a benefit, a strong economic benefit, to have access to paid family and medical leave, in part because it helps women in particular stay in the workforce. It helps them retain their jobs, which is critical for not only their own economic stability, but it's critical for our national economy. What we know is when more women are participating in the workforce, it grows our economy, and we already know that we lose about $650 billion a year, in part because our women's labor force participation does not match that of some of our global partners. So paid leave is an important strategy to address that problem.
Other countries do it?
Other countries, almost every country does it, Senator, and quite frankly, we ought to be able to do it too, and we know from states that we can do it.
And if, just say you're my mom from Rhode Island, if she is forced to choose between a job that does not allow her the leave that is necessary to take care of her child versus staying home and taking care of the child, I would bet that she and a lot of moms like her would forego the job and stay home. That's the mother's first responsibilities to a child with a disability.
Absolutely.
So it's the prospect of paid leave when needed that actually adds her to the workforce, is it not?
Absolutely. I mean,
And is that like a one-off, that everybody else is different, that that's the only place that would happen is with her in Rhode Island? Or is that something that would repeat itself across other families and across other states, that it actually adds to the workforce to have a benefit like this, so that people who have the particular needs like she does feel that they can actually operate in the workforce without compromising their obligations at home?
it absolutely is the case that we've seen across the country where there are paid leave programs. And we know also from the Family and Medical Leave Act that when people have the assurance of being able to take time off, it not only helps them in terms of the care they need to provide for their families, but it helps with their economic stability. And it's crucial at all times, particularly for women who are far more likely to be the ones who have to leave their job to care. Because we know they do that. That's part of what happened during the pandemic, Senator, is that 1 million women left the workforce. And it's because they had no choice but to leave the workforce to care for their families.
Yeah. I think we've had a similar argument here in this committee as regards the child tax credit, which I would argue also helps facilitate work and helps people get to work. Because if you are a mom with kids and you get a robust child tax credit, you can now afford, with those child tax credit dollars, the child care that allows you to go to work. So I think many of these things actually support the workforce and support jobs and economic growth. So thank you all for being here. The chairman has asked me to gavel out the hearing. I believe, as he does, that now's the time for Congress to enact a national paid leave program, that a national comprehensive program would be good for business, good for workers and families, and good for the economy, a triple win, that a national paid leave program will also make the American workforce more competitive against China, and that when small businesses like Ben's thrive, that our economy will also thrive. Members will have 7 days to submit questions for the record for these witnesses. That means Wednesday, November 1, by close of business, to get any questions that you have in. I want to thank all the witnesses again for their time and trouble being here. And with that, the Senate Finance Committee is adjourned.